You know, it was really hard, weird 2 years, losing a friend, losing my band. I had to like really make this into music. So this album reflects those times and go beyond.
Today we are ranking the albums of Soulfly, starting with Soulfly in 1998.
I am what I create, believing in my fate, integrity is my name.
Now, I'm particularly biased towards these first two albums because they were my jams in high school. Even that aside, the debut goes super hard, and rightly so considering it's a part of a dedication to Max's murdered stepson. So many banger tracks with a lot of great guest musicians. That opening riff on Eye for an Eye really sets the tone with Dino and Burton from Fear Factory. First Commandment does a great job of playing with contrasting super heavy and super quiet sections with Chino from Deftones. Benji Ware of Skindred and DJ Lethal guest on the fun Quilambo, and even Fred Durst's appearance on Bleed goes crazy hard. Not to mention the atmosphere on this thing is brilliant with all the awesome tribal sounding drumming, chanting, Portuguese lyrics. It basically takes what Roots did and cranks it up to 11. There's a reason why this made my top 10 new metal albums list, and I think it still stands out among the rest. It was certified gold, and it is going to perfection. They followed that up with Primitive in 2000. Hard to top that, but this is a great follow-up, continuing on with all those same elements that made that work so well. Back to the Primitive makes for another great opener with equal parts pure headbanging and cultural adoration, even incorporating the Brazilian berimbau. Plenty of other awesome additional instruments too, including Congo drums, sitar, twang, and various wind instruments alongside more hype chanting parts. Then we get even more insane guest features, the likes of which I would say is one of the craziest lineups I've ever seen on a single album. Pain has both Chino making a return alongside Grady Avenel of Will Haven, Jump to Fuck Up, which right down to its title is peak new metal, features Corey Taylor.
If you're gonna fight, what you gonna do? Jump the fuck up!
They even got Tom Araya of freaking Slayer on the thrashy Terrorist, and then of all people, John Lennon's son Sean for Sun Song, which is one of my all-time favorites from the band, underrated track. Honestly, the only part of this album I don't love are the kind of R&B backing vocals on Fly High, but it's far from a deal breaker. These first two, again, really capture the spirit of what I love most about this band, and I don't think they've ever truly matched it since, so this one is also going to perfection. Next up was 3 in 2002.
Fighting for your soul, defending what is yours. Arm in arm, eye and all.
So this is where I originally kind of jumped ship with the band, as I remember being really disappointed with this when it came out. The production is a bit different, which is part of what put me off. It's kind of stripped back and even sort of flat sounding. It very much sounds like people in a studio versus on the last two where I feel like I'm hearing the actual open air of Brazil. On the positive side of the track list, Downstroy is a decent opener, which notably was the original album title. Four Elements, Last of the Mohicans, and Call to Arms are pretty fun, and Seek and Strike is a fine single, albeit kind of a lesser retread of other songs, which is actually what I think of most of this album.
Here we go! Another day, another strike! Here we go! It's the living sacrifice!
Brazil appropriately leans back into the Portuguese and tribal elements, as do the various instrumentals at the end, though I think these would have been better scattered throughout the runtime. And the drumming in general consistently continues to be one of my favorite elements of the band. On the negative, I'm not a big fan of One, which features Christian Machado of Il Nino, or the cover of Sacred Reich's One Nation, and the opening of Tree of Pain is just kind of lame, which is no shade to Asha Rabuan, as she has a good voice. She's also the one that did the vocals I mentioned on Fly High. It's grown on me a bit over the years, but it's definitely not on the same level and lacking that same spark. I'm going to put this one at good tier. Then we have Prophecy in 2004.
I see the red sea parting from domain. I see the desert clouds lit above me.
This one, though, was a real treat and definitely had me kicking myself for ignoring it for so long when I finally circled back to it. The title track is a banger opener, wicked tribal drums, and Max coming in with full fury. Living Sacrifice is a rager, bringing those wailing guitars. Love the big solo on Execution Style, along with that great scream-along chorus, and Born Again Antichrist is also a ripper.
Yeah, born again, anarchist, thou destroy the system within.
And loving once more the stepped-up world music influences on tracks like Mars, Moses, and Parada. The drummer Joe Nunez actually worked at my local guitar center, and I went to school with his half-sister. Real nice guy. David Ellefson of Megadeth also did some of the bass along with the guy from Primer 55. Really solid, actually with a lot of diversity while still being a fairly consistent listen. Even the In the Meantime helmet cover is pretty awesome. A few slightly lower points, but a very good entry overall. I think I put this at perfection last time. I am moving it to Fantastic because there was another album that supplanted it this time. So next up is Dark Ages in 2005.
God may shine, God won't shine.
Max had a lot of reasons to be pissed off again with this album, as this was recorded in the wake of another family death in his 8-month-old grandson, as well as the murder of his good friend Dimebag Darrell. And that definitely comes through on the music. Babylon kicks things off on a seriously heavy and infectious note, followed up quickly with the skanky beats and squealing solos of I and I. Arise Again and Carved Inside have some really fun thrash riffs, bass, and start-stop rhythms, and the main riff on Frontlines is a total ripper. And yet again, some really delightful world music influences and Portuguese lyrics to break things up and help give it that extra unique twist. Riot Starter also has some like the Prodigy energy to it and also features Dave Ellefson. This is the highest audience ranked album on Metal Storm and Rate Your Music, and I can understand why I decided to move it to Perfection this time. Moving on, we have Conquer in 2008.
Blood, fire, war, pain is everywhere, it's in our face.
Max Cavalera stated that he had been heavily influenced by Bolt Thrower, Napalm Death, and Slayer in writing for this album. Rightly so, Bloodfire War Hate kicks off in full thrash mode, calling back to Sepultura, and even has guest vocals from Morbid Angel's David Vincent. Same energy goes for Fall of the Sycophants. I love the tribal drumming, added effects, and surprise interlude with great bass on Unleash, which also features Dave Peters of Throwdown. Killer soloing and punky beats on Paranoia, and Warmageddon is a slower chugger. Big doomy riffs and a pretty rad groovy middle section on Touching the Void, and awesome atmosphere on For Those About to Rot. Very behemoth guitar tone on Enemy Ghost, great riffs and subtle backing sitar, though the vocals are kind of meh on this one, and speaking of which, this one's a little bit long-winded and repetitive at times. Doom feels a little uninspired until it gets to the chill part, and this is easily one of the worst Soulfly interludes, but overall, another strong listen. I'm going to put this one at great tier. Next up is Omen in 2010. So tracks like Bloodbath and Beyond, Kingdom, Off With Their Heads, and Vulture Culture feeling a little generic in their riffs and songwriting. Not bad, just a little bit mid. And Max's vocals lack the bloodlust that usually make this more kind of simplistic lyrical approach work for me. Jeffrey Dahmer actually feels like it crosses the line from case study to outright celebration, which is a little bit off-putting. Rise of the Fallen calls back more to the earlier material with the big groove mixed with a little Static X flair and even some sitar. Greg Puciato of the Dillinger Escape Plan also provides additional vocals. That sounds like a dream on paper, but feels a little bit clunky in execution. Similar notes for the Prong collab on Lethal Injection. Such a promising union, and yet it ends up being just kind of decent overall. Great soloing, but falls short pretty much everywhere else. Also, really light on the regional influences, aside from a few sprinkles here and there. Frankly, underwhelming feels like the key word here. Not even one truly standout track I would put in a playlist with my other favorites, though Mega Doom comes pretty close. I'm going to put this one at good tier. But then we got Enslaved in 2012. So luckily they rallied quite a bit for this one, bringing in Tony Campos of Static X and Fear Factory on bass, and the only album to feature former Borknagar drummer David Kincaid on drums. Love the crunchy bass intro of World Scum, as well as the always raunchy snarls of Travis from Cattle Decapitation. Intervention is a slapper, and Gladiator is another groovy banger with some of that primitive energy, as well as more sitar and surprising melodic directions. Des Fafara of Coal Chamber and Devil Driver on Redemption of Man by God, which seems like such a no-brainer in retrospect. More killer atmosphere on American Steel and Legions, bringing back that wailing wah effect. Max sounds ultra pissed in the intro of Treachery. Still light on the world music and tribal elements, but it's nice to hear the Portuguese and Spanish guitar on Plata o Plomo. Notably, no Soulfly instrumental either, which at this point is fine with me. Chains and Revengeance make for a much stronger conclusion anyways. Last on Roadrunner Records, another arguable contender for top tier. This one actually fought it out with Dark Ages this time as I was going through them and kind of going back and forth with these. I actually think this is a little bit more consistent than Dark Ages, but maybe not just like as I don't know, it's tough. But anyways, I put this one at fantastic. I would even put it above Prophecy at this point. But next up is Savages in 2013. So just a year later, and produced by Terry Date, who also did 3, Prophecy, and Dark Ages. This was their first on Nuclear Blast. Max's son Zion on drums, and his other son Igor is also on lead single Bloodshed, which, while wholesome, is truly kind of underwhelming. They would have better collabs on some of the other albums. Other guests here include Declare War's Jamie Hanks on Fallen, Clutch's Neil Fallon on Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla, and Napalm Death's Mitch Harris on KCS. Shame that none of that really ends up being nearly as promising as it sounds. Like, you hear that and it's like, wow, this record must rip. But similar to Omen, this feels a bit undercooked and unremarkable. It's lacking some really memorable tracks, and it's very overlong too, at almost an hour. It's easily one of my least favorites. I'm putting it at okay. I don't really think they have a terrible album though. So moving on, we have Archangel in 2015. The lowest rated album on Metal Storm at a miserable 6.8. We Sold Our Souls to Metal is really obnoxious too. Not a good way to open up the album in my opinion. The title track feels like it kind of meanders all over the place. It feels like they kind of lost their focus. And really the whole album has this kind of like freeform jam session vibe to it. Some more guest spots here too, with Matt Young of King Parrot, Todd Jones of Nails, Anahid MOP of Master of Persia, and more of the Cavalera clan. Again, though, honestly, in my opinion, it's not bad. It's just really kind of lacking in structure and intensity. It has some cool moments, too, an interesting atmosphere, especially on tracks like Ishtar Rising, and I would at least probably rather listen to this than Savages. Not the worst thing ever, but pretty messy and forgettable. This one is also going to okay. Next up is Ritual in 2018. So as quoted by Max, for this one, we really tried to retain the groove of early Soulfly as well as my love for the heavy, fast stuff I'm into, and I'd say it delivers on that balance pretty well. Nice to hear some tribal elements on the title track to kick things off, and Dead Behind the Eyes is a great follow-up with some of that Lamb of God energy in both the riffs and Randy Blythe's guest vocals. Ross Dolan of Immolation also features on the grindier portion of Under Rapture, which isn't an all-time favorite, but is solid in its own right. Plenty more great tracks here. Bite the Bullet has both great riffs and drumming across the board. Feedback is fun with the clear Motorhead energy. Also dig the acoustic intro on the otherwise tapping Shredfest Demonized, as well as the hand drums and chanting on parts of Blood on the Street. That track in general is just totally killer. This one also actually has a decent Soulfly instrumental that I feel captures the original spirit of that tradition. Pretty concise too at 43 minutes. Not a huge fan of Evil Empowered. It was produced by Josh Wilbur. Really, really strong. I would put this one at like the top of great tier. It almost made a case for entering fantastic, but not quite. Moving on to Totem in 2022. Now, off the bat, once more, I will say, especially given the theme and cover art of this one, I still find myself disappointed that they weren't incorporating more of those great regional instruments and tribal elements that made me fall in love with the band to begin with. But that aside, they've still done a decent job of melding that atmosphere and overall spirit into the music on top of the general groove metal approach. We do get some more overt nods here and there, too, with some of the drumming on Rotten Pain and Ancestors, Soulfly 12, of course, as well as the chanting, drumming, and kind of reggae-esque closing section of the nearly 10-minute closer Spirit Animal, which also features guest vocals from Richie of Insight and soloing from Chris of Power Trip and Mammoth Grinder. No complaints here too, with just so many absolute ragers like Scouring the Vial, which also features John Tardy of Obituary. Definitely one of my favorites of the album alongside the pummeling Ancestors. Then there's the almost Tom G. Warrior sounding flavor grunts and snarls on The Damage Done that had me making the stank face more than once. Love the very new metal throwback vibes of the title track before it makes that surprise transition into thrash territory, and the Rain and Blood inspired Filth Upon Filth is another standout with its incredibly infectious chugs and fuck the world attitude. Tons of super heavy headbanging riffs and ripping solos. Genuinely, there's very little not to love without a single dud, and as far as Soulfly records go, this easily exceeded my expectations in just how consistently energetic and engaging it is all the way through. For consistency's sake, I even considered swapping this one at the top as well, but it landed itself pretty high up on Fantastic. Before we get to the latest album, just a reminder to hit that like button if you're enjoying the video. It helps me out in the algorithm, as does putting your own comments below about your favorite and least favorite albums. Post your own rankings. This is just my own opinion, and I'm interested to see how you justify yours. But next up, we have Chama in 2025. The title translates to flame, but the meaning goes well beyond that. This is loosely a concept album about a boy who travels from Brazil to the Amazon and is taught the way of this ancestral fire. So happy as usual to hear those tribal elements front and center on the intro Indigenous Inquisition going into the raging storm the gates. This track would have been right at home on Primitive, and I am so here for it. Dino's unmistakable bouncy Fear Factory riffs make an appearance on No Pain Equals No Power. Love the gang vocals and tribal drumming on this one as well, not to mention additional vocals from Ben Cook of No Warning and Gabe Franco of Unto Others. Todd Jones of Nails also returns on the equally intense Nihilist, which is dedicated to the late LG Petrov of Entombed. Michael Ammett of Arch Enemy also plays leads on the under 2 minute semi-grindy Genna, and Favela Dystopia has some crossover power trip energy. Alternatively, Black Hole Scum has a much more expansive and atmospheric feel to its crunch that lives up to its name. Always As, Always Will Be has some good atmosphere too, but feels like it has plans to go somewhere big and fails to deliver on that. And having Soulfly 13 right afterwards doesn't amount to much either. But we close strong again with the title track with some really fun vocals and wailing guitars. It definitely feels like Max took a lot of the production choices he put into the recent Sepultura re-recordings on this one, what with the copious amounts of reverb, and I think it really contributes to that blazing, fiery sound that they seem to be going for. I don't think I love this one as much front to back as Totem, but it also goes in some of the more tribal directions that I'm looking for. You'll also rarely find me talk about an album being too short, but this one does feel like it could use like another song or two. Overall, after many listens and kind of going back and forth listening to this and then listening to an older album, listening to this, I am feeling at this point a great tier, kind of close to Ritual, somewhere in there. Y'all check out this playlist for more groove metal rankings, or this one for new metal rankings. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.